a David Ellefson interview recap, welcoming Rudy Sarzo to the channel, and a main reason why your fingerstyle may be suffering and how to fix it. Metal Bass Monday. So lots to cover this week, so let's get at it. If you've been watching for the past couple of weeks, one of the pieces of information or tips that I've given out is a lot of people ask me about onboard preamps, meaning preamps that go inside your bass. And I said that one of the big ways that I avoid a lot of expense, because I'm always looking to cheap out, is to mount those preamps inside of a pedal. And that's going to be part of a shootout that's going to be coming up soon. As you know, I'm a big fan of the different sounds and eras of Spectre basses. So I'm going to do a shootout in between the most well-known versions of the preamps in those. So what I've got here is, this was just sent to me from the Czech Republic. The guy who actually developed the tone pump preamp has put one into here, and this is mounted up and good to go as a foot pedal. And then this is a copy of the original Spectre NS2 preamp. So those are the two most well-known of the original Euro and American series, and I'm going to do a shootout in between them. But it's also a cool thing to see, having this, like I said, put it into a foot pedal. I don't have to put a tone pump into 9 different basses if I have that many, or how many you may have. One preamp, one pedal, all the basses get to use it. Clean, to the point, sits on your pedal board, profit. So, good tip there, and that's going to be a feature of a shootout. So this should be fun. Look at 2 different eras of the Spectre preamps and see what the advantages or disadvantages of each are. So that'll be coming up here shortly. So if you haven't already, run immediately to my interview with David Ellefson. It was a really great and fun thing. He shared a lot of really cool information, and we went over a number of things. And he gave a great segment for the patrons on Patreon and Subscribestar that analyzed and went over my analysis video of how he composed My Last Words from the album Peace Sells and The Conjuring, the difference between the two, and his concept behind writing bass lines like that. So that's a cool thing. If you want to get in on that additional content, links to both patron accounts are down below. Love to see you there. Now, on the other side of that, what I wanted to do is revisit a couple of things and talk about some stuff I've mentioned on the channel, or highlight it and show that players like Ellefson reinforce this type of info too. The first being, he mentioned that some of the best bass lines and sounds he's ever gotten, I should say, were gotten with cheap gear. You know how I'm a fan of finding hidden treasures and cheap things here and there? But he said it's not always the best bass. Now, another thing I've talked about is how I've made the claim that the Spectre NS2 kind of revolutionized the sound of rock and metal bass. It was the iconic sound of the late 80s forward, and to my surprise too, apparently Dave has used his NS2 a lot. So what you think is being used on the album isn't necessarily what's being used on the album. He also used a vintage Fender P-Bass and a modulus, all of which he covers in there. I'm a big fan of modulus as well. But it goes to show a couple of things. One is that don't get caught up so much with trying to imitate what you see an artist doing, or getting a sound that you think is like theirs by buying their gear, because sometimes what you see them using live isn't what got them that recorded sound. In fact, a lot of times it's not. The other part is that you should be crafting your tone with whatever you have and exploring on your own, because just like these guys, what is their mainstay gear isn't always that super special item that really gets them their sound that you probably don't know about. And that oddball piece is the one that works better even than the gear they use live. So, you know, something I've talked about with experimenting and not following what you see on someone's gear all the time, and trying to find the sound with what you have rather than imitation. Dave totally backs that up and gave some really interesting album breakdowns as to which basses were on which albums. Another thing he talked about was the idea of carving out your tone according to the guitars and drums, being able to fit inside of, an EQ spectrum and finding the holes and delivering through there. He talked about how he carves out a certain section of his mids, allows guitars to sit in there, adds something to be able to cut into that range but not override it or interfere with the guitars, and then fits into a lower range that sits right inside the kick drum. He talks about it in the interview, and kind of becomes almost one machine with it, giving a total punch with the kick drum, adding a certain sound that's signature to what he feels Megadeth does. So I know I've talked about that before and how to analyze different EQ curves and find the holes and things. But again, just to have it reinforced by a legendary player like him, it's really cool to see, and it gives it just that much more credibility, and how he speaks on it in a way that maybe does a better job at helping you understand than the way I've delivered it. And now, following the awesome Dave Ellefson interview, tomorrow, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that bell so you get this alert. I'm welcoming to the channel the legendary rock and metal bassist Rudy Sarzo. This is not an interview. Rudy came in and basically talked with me for just short of 3 hours. Amazingly generous guy. And he went into detail, basically covered an entire arc of history, starting at Quiet Riot with with Randy Rhoads, into Ozzy, back into platinum selling Quiet Riot post Randy Rhoads. Then he goes into joining Whitesnake. That, it's this just covering, this incredible time period where he was just omnipresent in music, and what it took to have a career like that. We're focusing a lot of the conversation on his gear as it evolved, but what you wind up getting through it is why his choices were made, what it was like to be on tour, and why certain gear choices were made because of the way the soundboard and the soundmen were affecting the overall tone. And I mean, I don't want to go into the whole thing here. It's best just to sit with it, but it's more of a time capsule, and I'm really glad I could document something from an era of players with knowledge that we're just not going to see again. Having to deal with arena shows and going to different countries and technology that wasn't to the point that we have now. I think one thing really becomes evident is the strength of relying on yourself and making do. And I find too often players use as an excuse not having the perfect environment or the perfect gear, or I need the latest blah, blah, blah that's going to be complete garbage in everybody's opinion 7 seconds later, something like that. You see how he, under whatever condition it was, made the best with what he did and then kept carving his sound. It's an amazing example of being an individual, being an artist that sculpts and molds their own signature sound and visual image and everything else. I can't recommend it high enough, not just because I did it, because again, I don't talk that much. Rudy just had a great flow and he just goes. But it's also a great thing on, seeing his gear and understanding how and why things happened, and even things like instrument manufacturing and why problems exist and why some artists leave different companies at different times. You don't always get to hear those backstories and things. And there's some great funny anecdotes that are in it. He really had me cracking up at a few points. And yeah, it's just a great time, and it's something where you definitely want to sit with it and just enjoy hearing it. Almost like an audio documentary of early rock and metal from a guy who was right at the center of it. So definitely check that out, and we'll definitely do a recap on that. I'll probably do a live stream with the patrons and stuff just to talk about the incredible amount of info in it and kind of do a post-game wrap-up, as it were. But yeah, really good stuff. That's going to be available tomorrow on the channel, and there's also a patron and subscribe star part for that, where Rudy went into some really amazing life philosophy things and talking about how he maintained his career and how he became so in demand that he was just everywhere with platinum selling metal and rock bands. And that got pretty deep, but it was really, really cool. So to get that, again, patron and subscribe star down below. And for patrons, that interview and the patron clip are already up. Enjoy. So next up is something that I've noticed in a lot of lessons I've been given lately. And it's a simple maneuver, but something that I think causes a lot of problems with fingerstyle. So we're going to break that down real quick and help knock it out, because it's an easy fix. So let's take a look. So what I've been seeing a lot is a lot of players' fingerstyle suffers as they move across the strings. And what I mean by that is, they're playing together here, but as they move up, something changes and a lot of people don't realize it. So I wanted to highlight it and knock this out. What it is that people will anchor correctly on, their pickup or their B string or something, but as they start playing, this thumb stays exactly where it is. So, if I'm going across the strings, I'll see them do this. Here's the problem. First of all these strings in here, unless your left-hand game is really solid, they're ringing out. If I'm on the top, then all this is ringing out. Especially if you're playing with distortion or high gain, that turns into a mess real quick. The other problem is that your technique isn't consistent, so a lot of your practice is going down the toilet. And what I mean by that is, say you're working here and you're playing a lot of bass lines. Your hand is in this position, kind of turned this way, and you're playing like this. The problem comes in that as you start moving up, your hand is opening up. This can be done pretty rapid. That is a lot more difficult, and it's a completely different set of muscles. You're making a completely different set of actions. What you want to do is keep these completely consistent. You want your playing here to be the same as your playing up here. Always like this. So what do we do to fix this? You need to start moving your thumb forward. This does two things. One, keeps your hand in the same position. And the other is that it mutes the strings as you go across. And what you want to do is look at your strings, however many you have, in 3-string groups. So whatever string you're moving on, obviously if you're on the bottom, you're here. And then up to your second string, you say there 2, because what's happening is each time you pull down, your finger is coming to rest on the string below it. So it's muting it. So if I'm playing on the E string, I don't have to worry about it too much. And my thumb is anchored on the pickup. If I go up to the A string, even, this is as far as I want to go before moving again. Because the A, I'm now plucking down and I'm landing on the E string, right here, A to E, and my thumb is on the B string. So that's my 3-note group. Thumb rest, center string that's being muted by the rest stroke, and the active string. Every time you move up, you move to another set of 3. So B, E, and A, E, A, and D, A, D, and G, and so on. And as I move up, what's happening is my thumb is coming across here, and it's muting the strings below it. So let's take a look at the top grouping. If I've got my D, G, and C strings, I'm anchored on D. G is being covered by the rest stroke, and I'm playing C. So and everything below is muted by my thumb. Turn sideways, you can see it here. See how my thumb is here, and I've got these. So I've got everything muted, Everything's clean, and my finger is the same here as it is here. Now, obviously, you're going to break this at different times. You know, if you have to do a massive leap or something, you know, you kind of compensate with your left hand and things. But for the most part, as you move up, you just kind of hop, 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 hop. See how that goes? So, again, a really simple maneuver to get used to, using 3-note groups, thumb rest, rest stroke, active string. And you'll always have a good, clean, muted sound, and your technique will get faster and better because what you're practicing here works all the way across the board. So that to me has really been an amazing way of combining a couple of things into one simple movement. Muting, being able to keep my technique consistent, and also it makes things more rapid because instead of making a jump like this with my whole hand, my hand's doing this. I'm just caressing forward and back. Simple and fluid. Try that out if you don't already do something where you move your thumb to accommodate the neck and string crossing, and see if it doesn't clean everything up. Hit me up down in the comments. Let me know if this helps you out or if you feel like this is something that you've struggled with. Like I said, I've noticed it, and I'd say 8 out of 10 people that I've worked with recently in that they make big jumps and they do this thing with like the... And it costs them the muting, and it's also, I mean, how easy is it to do that with your hands all stretched and fanned out? What a pain in the ass, right? So use it wisely, my friends, and let me know how it works out. Hit me up in the comments below. So that's going to wrap it up for this week. I hope you enjoyed the Ellefson interview, and I really know you're going to really enjoy the Rudy thing. So also let me know down below, what did you think of the interview, and after sitting and viewing it, what were your favorite parts of it? What things did you find interesting? Were there things you disagreed with him on? And were there things that surprised you? Like, you know, me learning some of the stuff about the basses he used on different tracks was really interesting and surprising too. I never saw a vintage Fender P coming out, but just goes to show. Next time you sit there and go, is this bass good for metal? Well, Dave Ellefson says real old stuff does it, and he's proved it. So every bass is metal if the guy playing it is. So with that, we're going to wrap up. Thanks so much for watching. I'll look forward, as always, to seeing you below in the comments, and I will see you tomorrow with Rudy Sarzo.